All right, everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. We have a very exciting presentation today. I'm joined from BioKey and RSmart today as our presenters, and we'll get into that in just a few more minutes. Today's presentation is about unifying the student experience, finding resources quickly and securely. Now, before we go into the full presentation, I do want to mention just a quick item or two for housekeeping. First of all, you're all in listen-only mode. However, we want to encourage you to ask any questions you may have along the way, and you can do that by using the questions panel in the GoToWebinar interface. Also, we'll have a live Q&A at the end where we'll answer those questions as well as others that come in. And then a recording and presentation will be sent to you following this webinar. So if you have to drop halfway through or want this for sharing with other colleagues and friends, we will send it to you following the presentation today. All right, so with that, we'll get right into our discussion. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by a great panel of presenters. So I'm joined today by Dr. Todd Yates, Vice President of Enterprise Service at TransACT Communications, and also Mark Cochran, President of PortalGuard at BioKey International. I'm Kim Johnson, VP of Product at BioKey International, and your host for today. So with that, let's have Dr. Yates and Mark, let's have you quickly introduce yourselves with a little bit of background and experience in higher education. Dr. Yates, let's start with you.
Thanks. My name's Todd Yates. I have been in higher ed technology since 1991, previously serving as a CIO at a major institution in Texas, as well as I have worked for higher education technology providers like SCT, which is now Lucian, Blackboard, Collegius, just to name a few. Very familiar both sides of the table, both on campus and as working as a technology provider. So happy to be here today and looking forward to sharing some information.
Excellent, thank you. And like you said, you get to provide both perspectives today, having been in the role of CIO and then obviously on this side of the fence as well. And Mark, let's go to you. A quick introduction and a bit about your background in higher education.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Yes, this is Mark Cochran. I'm the president of PortalGuard. Been working with the company now for over 20 years. Have a tremendous amount of experience in the enterprise software and specifically security and identity access management solution space. I've been involved in supporting hundreds of educational customers with their security and identity access management needs, and we've definitely seen an evolution in the landscape. So from both security threats as well as the challenges around the migration of applications. So we're definitely looking forward to this conversation today and presenting some good information.
Great, excellent. Thanks, Mark. And great tee up into kind of the setup for the discussion for today, right? As you mentioned, the advanced cyber attacks we're seeing. And really this slide depicts it all, right? On one hand, we have college students and student experience concerns where students are spending a lot of their time looking for resources and information in a campus portal. And what we're seeing is they want to, of course, quickly find things like grades, programs, financial resources, and then stay on top of any of the upcoming social activities. And oftentimes we've seen that they're not able to find what they're looking for, give up, and even potentially turn to different resources such as Google or other search engines. And so many of you out there, your primary target is to provide a welcoming place online as much as you can provide in the physical campus sense. And then, as Mark, you mentioned, on the other hand, providing that experience online is great. It needs to be convenient, it needs to provide a great experience, especially with remote learning here to stay. But institutions are facing even greater challenges than they have in the past, specifically with making sure things are safe. being able to provide a unified experience, something that the students like to use, but that is safeguarding their information, is really the achievement that we're all trying to get to, but there are some challenges there. For IT teams, it really is that challenge because they're trying to manage all of this with limited resources and potentially cybersecurity expertise. So that really brings us into our first question for Mark and Dr. Yates, right? This is obviously a challenge, right? Getting both of these things to work well together. First of all, why is it so important to have both efficient search as well as effective security on campuses? Dr. Yates, I'll start with you.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Yeah, the challenge, if you think of a traditional college/university environment, it's really an environment that opens you with welcome arms. It's supposed to be easily accessible, and the mission of any institution is to provide scholarship and education. So, especially with technology and especially in today's environment, there is a challenge making things both that have that feeling of easily accessible to an individual, but also providing, a better experience, but a secure experience, right? So that's a challenge with any technology. So universities, colleges are challenged right now with providing what is really blended content. Like they might have some that is public, they might have some that's behind authentication. They might have, kind of a mix of things in between there, depending on their population, whether it's students or faculty or alums. So it's important to have kind of a unifying experience that blends all that together, right? It's important to have a place where you can present that ease of access and have everything kind of under one access point, for lack of a better term, that makes it really easy to find and uses technology that people are used to today. If you're going to go out and look for something online, you're not going to start trying to randomly type different addresses or guess at what you might want. You're going to go to a search engine. So people are just naturally kind of in tune with that methodology. So having something, especially like One Campus, that puts that mixed content where you could have public content that doesn't require authentication mixed in with, secure content that, once a user launches it, requires authentication, is kind of a critical component to providing a seamless service and ease of access to your constituents, no matter who they are.
No, those are some great points, and kind of the appropriate nature of what type of access controls do you have in place for the type of information they're accessing. Is that what you're kind of highlighting here?
Yeah, exactly. I might have something that goes out to the community as a whole, and I don't really care. That's just a public announcement. It's more like a press release, right? Mm-hmm. But then I'm going to blend that in with something that requires probably a high degree of security and verifying who that user is on the other end.
Right. And I think we'll talk about it in just a little bit too, about unifying some of that information, right? You definitely talked and highlighted about, first of all, the content being all in one location, but then how do you control the access to it? Mark, how about you? How about some perspectives maybe deeper on the security side and how to be effective with the security that they're applying?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Kim. And yeah, definitely the student access experience is really critical. It's a core is definitely part of the core responsibility or mission of the institution is to provide that enhanced student experience. So cybersecurity is really got to be effective at not only preventing malicious attacks, but also be easy, frankly, for users to adopt. Mm-hmm. So security solutions that offer flexible authentication options that can address different user roles and different user access scenarios are going to produce the best results. So, what we've seen is, cybersecurity isn't really any good if it's not being properly used, and users become frustrated. If it's a burden on the IT team, and generating unnecessary help desk calls or costs associated with that security that's trying to be applied. And ultimately, users are fairly savvy, and they'll try to find ways to circumvent security if it's not presented in a usable form.
Mm-hmm.
So there can be without effective security, really, there can be gaps that will present themselves in your security posture for hackers to take advantage of and gain access to your data and systems. So it's really critical that you apply the right type of security. Certainly, as you mentioned, the reliance on providing users with remote access has significantly increased the likelihood that institutions might be compromised. So it's definitely a something that our customers are looking to address and make sure that they're on top of.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to leave users sort of in a frustrated mode where they have to remember and manage multiple passwords or be locked out completely. We don't want to negatively impact user productivity. So integrating your application environment behind some usable security that's can be flexible in nature to apply to different user roles or access scenarios is really critical for reducing cyber risk, allowing institutions to protect their reputation and their data, which is central as well, and providing ultimately a seamless user experience for all users, students, faculty, and staff. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really highlights to the points you made too is security is effective when it's adopted, right? I think that's a big caveat here where you can plan for all the controls and the nuances. But again, if it's inappropriately applied where it doesn't need to be, as Dr. Yates, you mentioned on data that's not sensitive, or if it's a type of method that they can't adopt, or even just passwords, right? It's only effective if it's adopted. And that's definitely a key point, I think, that stands out. And then, so moving forward into kind of, we talked about why it's so important to have. What about the how, right? So both of you touched a little bit on this, but how and what best practices and even solutions do you really recommend for providing that unified and secure student experience? Mark, I'll go to you first on this one. Any thoughts there?
Sure. First you need to understand your user access requirements, again, by role, and understand the workflows that they're trying to complete. So, for instance, a remote student that their needs may differ from an on-campus student. And the focus on really building your access policies around your current user types and access scenarios. So, implementing tighter security controls like multi-factor authentication is going to not only prevent cyber attacks, but we've also seen that a lot of our customers are reporting that cyber insurers now are requiring MFA for all their users to renew the policy. So, there's definitely other compliance-related requirements now that are driving, tighter integration and more sophisticated authentication methods. So, centralizing your authentication by making sure all your applications can integrate the SSO, it's going to really provide your users with not only a seamless access experience, reducing multiple password prompts and allowing them to get into the applications that they need to get into in a convenient way, but that integration also allows for unification of your access security policy. So it can really help an institution apply the right level of security, across the entire application environment, which is a great approach to managing these types of requirements. And then, self-service is always, really critical too. So allowing your users to help themselves, it's, many, students are working on a 24-hour, clock. And so they need ways to be able to, reset their password using like self-service password reset, for instance. And that can really help, drive efficiencies and cost reduction. In fact, one of our customers, Northeast Iowa Community College, saw a 90% reduction in password-related help desk calls by, implementing, SSPR. So really the key tip here is, really focus on enhancing user adoption and change management when making any of these security policy revisions.
Yeah, and so I think that's pretty key. Sounds like, know the workflows that they're in. You said remote, right? A remote student may need something very different than an on-premise, let's say even faculty member. And then you talked, I think, great highlights there is single sign-on, so that there's a lot less login prompts than we have today, and being able to secure that will be much easier that way, as well as those self-service. From the content perspective, Dr. Yates, how about on that side? What best practices do you see and maybe even implemented as a CIO to really unify that experience from maybe the data perspective or even access perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Kim. I think, from a CIO perspective, I wish I had some of the tools that are available now,
Right.
way back when, having partners to be able to implement some of these things instead of trying to work with limited staff on campus is a huge help. But I want to build on what Mark said there about roles and the value that you have when you integrate your single sign-on with your content delivery and really make it role specific. We see a lot of value in implementing something like Portal Guard with one campus because we are in the business of not dragging people through 14 clicks to find what they want to do. We really want to get them off to where what they matter of fact, one of our core tenets of our one campus implementation is, what do you want to do, right?
Yep.
It's not about us trying to guide you through a maze. It especially role-based content. So let's say that I've integrated single sign-on across my campus, and now I have an attribute value of admitted student when I log in. One campus allows you to actually tag your content and dynamically display it based on that role. Also with some algorithms in there that allow you to designate priority in the location on the real estate where maybe certain tasks or applications are displayed based on usage by my fellow admitted students. So the likelihood is after I've logged in, that role's been passed over from Portal Guard, my SSO, and I'm at one campus. Usually the top 2 or 3 things that I'm going to see on the screen are probably what I'm looking for anyway. And they're going to dynamically change based on where I am in the process or where I am in an academic calendar. That's a huge help. We used to look at content delivery a lot, like how many people were we reaching and were they sticking on a screen for a long time? It's the opposite today. We want people to not be in our application very long. Matter of fact, the quicker they bounce out, the higher our bounce rate is for somebody looking for an application or a piece of content, the happier we feel about it, because that means we have satisfied the goal of what they want to do.
That's fantastic. And kind of the term that came to mind for both actually the security experience and the content experience is it's personalized, right? So even, and I think in security, Mark, you've seen this, right? It's not a one size fits all for authentication. And we want to provide, a more personalized experience, what fits with their workflow. And Dr. Yates sounds like it's the same. Would you both agree to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree. Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's my key to security is that people are in the middle of it. So, and it's the same obviously for content. You know, what are you trying to get to? What are you trying to do quickly? That's a great mantra to go by. And then, so we talked about this is more on the experience side, what to provide students, right? And you can almost say faculty and staff as well, depending on the systems you have. But this really relies on what we've been calling unification, right? Or unification of the technology. You could say a unification of the experience, like we just talked about, but also the seamless integration that it requires really between things like online learning systems, content, and then the security tool itself. In other words, to obtain the best of both worlds, you have to unify systems. Dr. Yates, I'll turn it to you. How is this accomplished? What type of recommendations do you have to our audience today who are listening and maybe thinking that sounds wonderful, but how do you seamlessly get all these things to work together?
Yeah, so the key word there is interoperability, right?
True.
With the gone are the days, 30 years ago where you had a single system on campus that did everything. Today's environment, easily, even on small institutions, students, staff, and faculty might interact with 20, 30 different software vendors on a day. So getting those together, two key components. One, obviously, the ability to authenticate into them with a single username and password is critical. But also putting them under kind of one comprehensive search utility or service discovery, right? That I'm not having to go and learn, how to log into each vendor's system. I'm going to log into one place, I'm going to find it there, and I'm going to go from there. So making that happen from a content, presentation layer is actually pretty easy, especially with the way we approach kind of distributed publishing and each business unit kind of taking ownership of their particular tasks and keeping them fresh. But on the back end, on the tech stack, having the ability to have standard protocols and interoperability, from RESTful APIs that are fairly open yet ultimately very secure is critical. So the exchange of information in a secure fashion between all of those applications that you're unifying is something that we need to make easy, which is one of the goals that we have, and certainly blends in well with BioKey and PortalGuard perspective and unifying those on the back end as well.
Absolutely true. We've seen that a lot where there needs to be a central hub, but then there needs to be, like we've talked about, this seamless experience to go from that central hub to what they're looking for. Dr. Yates, what's a good example, from one campus to another application? What's a pretty common workflow, just to provide as an example that a student might be doing?
Right. So normally, I'm going to look for things on campus that I want to do, depending on what time of the year or where I am in my academic process. Right. So at the start of semester, I may be looking for registration and course schedules and everything else. But mid-semester, I'm going to change, and I'm going to be looking for my learning management system and course content, and then eventually, of course, hopefully I'm looking for my grades. So making sure that you have those things, regardless of where I might want to be on a given day, kind of tied together, right? I can find them all in the same location. I'm using the same username and password to access them, and I can pull that information together in summary format or direct links even into my LMS content or something like that. Certainly is a great benefit to an individual, because again, they get that kind of one-stop, convenience store approach for whatever they might be doing, and there's no guesswork. I'm not having to figure out, oh, okay, now I need to log into my LMS after the second week of classes started, or I'm just going to go to the same place. I'm going to use the same username and password and get the whatever information is relevant to me at the time.
That's perfect. Yeah, and I love the seasonality, or maybe not seasonality, but the phases that a student would be going through. And so to achieve that, Mark, from the IAM or Identity and Access Management side and single sign-on, how do you see education institutions accomplishing that today with IAM solutions?
Yeah, I think it's really important for institutions to take a comprehensive enterprise approach to security.
Mm-hmm.
That's ultimately going to reduce the ongoing complexity of your security management, and really starts with an inventory of your applications and the options that you have to integrate access and to get things unified. Ultimately, I think a lot of institutions have multiple approaches and potentially multiple vendors or providers that are doing the same thing or similar things from, like, for instance, a multi-factor authentication standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So you really need to look for solutions that are going to offer you the most flexibility and the most capabilities in a single platform. Tighter integration is going to provide more robust, security options for you, right out of the gate, as well as, as your, requirements evolve, and, again, really reduce complexity and improve your project time to value. Mm-hmm. So, supporting multiple single sign-on protocols, for instance, and open standards for access delegation are going to produce the best results and allow you to, adapt to, new requirements, new challenges that you may face, 6 or 12 months down the road. So, to achieve, true single sign-on, we offer, for instance, in PortalGuard, a whole variety of different, SSO protocols, including CAS support. Some applications are not easy to integrate with, and so having the different protocols available is really critical. Other types of approaches like the shibboleth SSO are notoriously difficult to manage. So trying to get other options, other solutions in place to deliver SSO that are going to both allow your IT team to improve SSO configuration and delivery and reduce that burden is really going to accelerate the benefits to the institution. And again, I would say, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, just flexibility around branding, really being able to customize the front door to your authentication solution is really key to make it feeling integrated and part of the environment. It makes for a better student experience or user experience, and it's really the first impression for your portal. So having that unified look is very important. And then there's a security benefit to it as well, because you're eliminating a standard out of the box authentication prompt, which frankly those standard authentication prompts are used quite often in large scale phishing attacks. So having something that's customized to your institution is going to give that user some reassurance that they're interacting with the right authentication and the right the right spot, the right portal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty common, right? If you go to a website and you're not familiar with it or it looks different, we're starting to be kind of conditioned now to question whether that's the right company or right, university that I'm logging into.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep.
And sounds like the theme there too, Mark, is, and we've seen it, and even talking to customers on my side, of just don't paint yourself into the corner. I think is kind of the saying we've seen, where something may seem amazing for, oh, you can do one-time passcodes and we can get you single sign-on, but when you actually go to implement it, oh, we don't support, XYZ methods that would be perfect for your students, and on top of that, we don't support CAS, or we don't support these specific applications. So time and time again, I think we've seen customers have to pay more or actually be able to have, like you said, multiple solutions to get to the same benefit. So something to be cognizant of.
Right. Yeah. Having that flexibility of approach and in not getting into a proprietary vendor methodology that's going to limit your ability to pivot or change as your requirements change is critical.
Right. Yeah, I think that goes for both sides, right? Whether we're talking one campus or on the portal guard side. And then, so all of this, we've covered a lot. We've talked about some of the challenges, the best practices, the solutions to actually do it. But as we hear and see, from all of our customers, I would say IT resources are on the tighter side, right? Somewhat limited. And for cybersecurity specifically, we've seen that in-house expertise can actually be pretty difficult to find. With IT departments really counted on for so much, can third-party companies be combined to perform work that will otherwise go unfulfilled? So can these IT departments look towards third parties? And really, how can our audience do more with less out there? Mark, why don't we stay with you? A couple points on that in terms of going to third-party companies and how can we do more with less?
Yeah, definitely. We offer both on-premises as well as cloud-based solutions, but the trend is definitely really now to outsource and move to the cloud. We've seen that very strong interest from our existing customer base as well as our new prospective customer engagements that. Software as a service definitely has the proven benefits in scalability, redundancy, integration, reduced time to value, and the speed to apply, new innovations, updates, and new releases. So, definitely moving to the cloud makes a ton of sense to most institutions. And really the burden has become too much for a lot of IT teams. It's not their, a lot of teams don't have dedicated, cybersecurity experts. So, and the stakes are very high if there's an event. And, the threat landscape continues to evolve. And IT security is very specialized. So, providing a third-party outsource option where you have subject matter experts that can provide, guidance in cybersecurity strategy and really looking for business partners and not just solution vendors. So we definitely, recommend a blended organization. I think let third-party security experts and cloud-based technology reduce the burden for your IT team.
No, I think those are great points. And Dr. Yates, how about from your perspective? I know you've talked about a blended organization, I believe, in the past. So some thoughts there, and what do you recommend?
Yeah, and building on what Mark said there, I mean, it's important to make sure that you pick the right partner, right? One of the things, and I'll go back to what I said earlier. I wish that I had the opportunities back when I was on campus, that are in the market now. But it is important that your vendor sees your perspective, right, and knows what your situation is, especially as an education institution. Your mission isn't IT. Your mission is unique. Your vendor should have that same perspective. You shouldn't be third-tier market, from a vendor. You're not manufacturing or healthcare or some other market vertical, and you're not a sub-department of that vendor. You want to partner up with someone who you have vetted and make sure that they understand the use case for higher ed, and both from your kind of unique business cycle, but as well as somebody that can be trusted to understand that you're not in the mission of delivering IT for IT's sake, It's much more about partnering with someone who can supplement your limited abilities on campus, or even integrate with your staff on campus in a partnership mode versus here's your invoice and I'll talk to you in 3 years. That's really not the way information technology service works in higher ed. It may work that way elsewhere, but the abilities to stay in close contact with your partner, and as Mark said, I'm not going to have the ability in a lot of cases to hire somebody whose specific skill set is embedded in one of these technologies. It is much more beneficial for me to be able to rely on somebody and to have someone who is responsible to me for providing that service. So that's a big deal. And the blended organization, it used to be a dirty word. It is not so.
Yep.
It is much more, like Mark said, even we see this, we've seen it for years now.
Right.
People are much more engaged in moving to the cloud and having the burden removed from their location on keeping hardware up to date and skilled staff engaged long term. So
no, I think those are all great points. I definitely like the delivery of IT for IT's sake. That's not the business we're in anymore. I think on all fronts, right? If people are the center of these experiences, it's really about delivering an experience, and that's really what the webinar today has been about: is how do you provide that unified experience. So that is all the panel questions we have for today. We're going to do just a quick wrap up and then jump into the live Q&A. So this is the time for our audience. Please submit your questions using the questions panel in the GoToWebinar control panel. And today's discussion really highlighted that challenge of unifying a student experience and keeping it secure, right? We talked a lot about if security is effective only when it's adopted, and the nuances of education workflows and how to deliver content to people when they need it. And so there are less clicks, right? As Dr. Yates, you pointed out. Today, we also highlighted some of the best practices, some ideas and tips for unifying systems, and then, of course, how to do more with less in terms of making sure to outsource, use third-party expertise, and move to the cloud. To wrap things up, I'm going to do just a quick overview about PortalGuard. That's BioKey's solution, PortalGuard IDaaS. PortalGuard is an award-winning single unified IAM platform, and we're really known for our flexible options as well as our expertise in education. Trusted by over 200 education institutions, including 55 FCCC community colleges. PortalGuard is selected really for our flexibility, as I mentioned, authentication methods. We offer over 16 different authentication methods for all those workflows that you have. Lots of federation single sign-on protocols, including the CAS protocol that's specific to higher education, and multiple directory integrations. So really, you get to decide where your identities are stored. We're the only IAM platform with identity-bound biometrics built in. Biometrics is something that is being widely adopted very rapidly. Again, don't paint yourself in a corner. Make sure you have a future-proof solution like PortalGuard. We offer hybrid environment desktop login, strong student IAM capabilities such as self-service account registration, and other self-service capabilities. And we're very affordable and simple pricing that's made for higher education. Dr. Yates, I'll turn it over to you to just do a quick wrap up about One Campus.
Sure. So One Campus is cloud-based discovery engine. That's kind of a unique term to say that it is not a traditional portal. It is an aggregator. So like we've talked about, there are a lot of different pieces of software on campus. So One Campus unifies them under one common UI and indexable, searchable, securable, SSO integrated location. It doesn't matter what the destination application looks like. If it can be reached on the web, you can put it under the searchable index for One Campus and present it in a really quick deep link to specific locations within the software. It's completely customizable and completely open. We have a RESTful API that lets you, manipulate things, everything within the application. You can also do that via the UI. Anything, any text, any fonts, anything, any colors, logos, etc., all customizable. And you can have different experiences based on your role that you inherit from your SSO. So I mentioned earlier in the webinar too, it is really driven around dynamic content. So things that are specific to me and my role, whether I'm student, faculty, or staff, that are important to me at the time I am in the academic cycle. That content gets rearranged without any human interaction. It literally is based on an algorithm, of what's being used in a certain time frame. And it really helps, kind of centralize and correlate the content where I am in my particular life cycle as a student or even as a faculty member. I can have content that is organized based on, me as an admitted student, and everything that I need to do as an admitted student is right there for me. But then when I become a, on campus or a remote learner, it has a different curated content approach that I didn't have to make any efforts at. It's just dynamically, tailored to my experience. And everything that we have done from One Campus has been a mobile first and ADA accessible approach. So that is historically how we see students interacting. Students don't log into desktops in a lab anymore. Those days are long gone. They're accessing what they need to do on campus on their phone or a mobile device. Very low percentage on traditional laptops and computers anymore. So that's the way it's designed. It's interoperable with any browser, basically, that students might come across.
Fantastic. And so definitely sounds like that personalized experience, like you said, the dynamic content being presented based on the role. So excellent overview. And with that, we're going to turn it right into the Q&A session to bring it home for today. I will mention both of our platforms are available to be able to demo and try out. You can sign up to try PortalGuard IDaaS on our website with a free trial, or contact us for any type of discovery call. And then, of course, visit onecampus.com as well for any demo or trial there as well. All right, so we have a few questions that have come in. The first one, so same vein as tight IT budgets. When it comes to university labs, intellectual property, and confidential research theft or attack, how do you approach the need to calculate the cost of lost or stolen R&D for the purposes of net present and cost benefit analysis? That is a heavy question. Dr. Yates, I might turn it to you to start, see your thoughts on it just from being in the CIO role and perspective. But the summary here is, how are you calculating the cost or loss of stolen R&D for net present and cost benefit analysis?
Yeah, it's without knowing the particular content, it's really hard to calculate what my expected loss would be. From a combating that perspective, a theft or loss of proprietary intellectual information, it is important, absolutely critical, to make sure that you have a common security approach and common security policy, which I think blends more into what Mark's focus is. It's something you have to make sure that you don't have exposed content and that is randomly accessible just because I happen to have a login to a lab. You need to have content that is really secured behind something that's meant for a specific identity and identity policy.
That's great. Mark, anything to add there?
Yeah, I concur with what Todd said. Definitely, I would say that again, to his last point there, really making sure that you have role-based access enabled, so you can make sure that you're applying the right level of security based on that user and the type of data that they can access. From a ROI perspective, obviously you want to be in a situation where that you're blocking an event like that from even happening. And that's why applying, an enterprise approach to security across the board is going to, eliminate those gaps in oversight from a security perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And somewhat on the same vein of the question too is, I think, at least from experience with customers, we see a lot of selecting and cherry picking as to what accounts get tighter controls, right? And a lot of times it is from an IT budget perspective. But really the mantra now is you need controls and stronger authentication on all accounts. Just ways to do it more cost effectively based on the method that you choose. So that's also something I've seen selected out. I think Dr. Yates, as you mentioned, was, some content just isn't as secure. And just because you have access, does that mean you should have access to that data? Are good questions to be asking.
And I'll just add too, I mean, if folks think that higher education assets are not a target for hackers and malicious users, that they're fooling themselves.
Right.
The higher education environment is what's commonly referred to as a target-rich environment with a fresh turnover of new accounts and new exploitability abilities every semester. So for an entity intent on doing harm or utilizing resources that are not theirs, higher education is a rich environment for exploitation.
That is a fantastic point. And all my years in cyber as well, I'm always amazed because I would say higher education also holds all types of data, right? From healthcare to financial to student information. But there is a great target on this vertical's back, so to speak, just because of the type of data and information. Like you said, there's a nice rolling enrollment of accounts as well to go after. So great point. All right, another question came in. So how can colleges and universities make it easy to conduct business when so much time is spent hunting for various forms deep within various web applications? That doesn't have a lot of security in it. So Dr. Yates, I'll turn that one to you.
That one's an easy one. So you put it in an indexable, searchable content, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, you use meta tagging that really will tune what people are looking for based on what their real attributes are, right? So with one campus especially, we have kind of unlimited values that you can pass via an attribute via CAS or SAML or ADFS, Azure, whatever it is. Say I'm a faculty member who is on a specific campus, and I am in a specific portion of the university. Let's say you have a law school, and so I'm on the secondary campus, but I'm a faculty member with the law school, and there are forms that are particular to me. I can tag that task, that link to that form, with all of those values and attributes. So I am more likely to see that presented to me as personalized content for me versus trying to sort through 300 forms from 4 different campuses.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, so tagging it is what you said is kind of the key there to make that make those results relevant to them. Is that correct?
Yeah, and making sure your single sign-on is feature rich with attributes, right? That you're don't have everybody just lumped in one common group, that you actually know that they are faculty members from a specific college within the university or a specific location, or or maybe that they're first year students that are registered as biology majors, whatever it is. Making sure that you're able to identify those users is super helpful when tagging that content.
Makes sense. Yep. Getting down to we talk a lot about security policies, right, and granularity thereof, and they are very important in order to provide the right either security and or content. All right, one more question looks like we have time for. With multi-factor authentication for students, is there an authentication method you've seen used more than others? Mark, I'll turn that one to you.
Sure. Yeah, definitely PIN code delivered by either SMS or email has been the most popular method we've seen for students.
Okay.
Google Authenticator is a distant third option.
Okay. Yeah, and it seems like distribution, if you think about the alternatives like hardware tokens or something that has to be sent, right? Those are obviously off the table. So it has to be convenient, to say the least.
Right, right, and there are other other options that might be tokens or other things that might be used for non-student access. Where you have smaller user populations for faculty and staff versus the student population.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. All right, and with that, looks like we've gotten all the questions we're going to have for today. So that concludes the presentation for today. As I mentioned, it will be sent around following today's event, the recording as well as the presentation. But excellent content, and thank you so much to the panel, Mark and Dr. Yates, for joining us today. I think great tips on unifying the student experience to be able to find relevant results quickly and securely. So thank you both, and thank you for everybody for coming.
Thank you, everyone.